Oshawa was a great place for me to grow up because our first home was a century home, and my father does woodworking, and so he was restoring the house. So it was a big old house with lots of fancy woodwork and baseboards, and it was a lovely place to grow up. I played a lot in our yard. We had quite a large lot then. As they build homes now, there's not usually a lot of space, so it's just a great place. We had apple trees in the backyard and pear trees, and I would play back there and make forts.
Ended up in Oshawa because my daughter and her husband lived here, my daughter Anne, and I just loved their place. It was backing onto Harmony Creek. And we walked all around Oshawa asking people if they would be willing to sell their homes. Anyway, we started putting notes in people's letter boxes and things. Anyway, it turned out that the people who lived right next door to my daughter had put their house up for sale about 2 years earlier and had not been successful in selling it. And so they agreed to sell it to us. So we were just delighted. That was marvelous.
We had 3 days to find a place, and we found some place and just moved in. So it was spur of the moment, but it worked out really, really well. It's a townhouse on the ravine. It's not fancy and it's not large, but the back patio opens up to the natural area, and so you can't beat that. It's just wonderful to sit out in the back and look at the nature.
The neighborhood was developed at the end of the 50s, beginning of the 60s, out of what was apparently a 200-acre farm. So, and they kept a lot of the trees. Neighbors are quite generous in the way that they relate to the other people in the neighborhood, and are very willing to look out for other people and to help out. We've had, for example, when we're away, we have a lot of help with things like who's going to take care of the dogs and cats. Or there are two of my neighbors on either side who are older women in their 80s, and all of us consider that, you know, they belong to us as well as belonging to whatever their real family, their, you know, most proximate family is.
When we first moved to Oshawa in '65, we had nothing when we got here with a station wagon, some furniture, 5 kids, and I think $1.89 in our pocket. And we went to some people that I had known from down east and stayed with them for a while in their cramped little place. And then we moved into St. George, this Anglican church over here, and lived in their Sunday school rooms for 6 weeks. And on Sunday, every time people came to church, they could smell roast beef cooking and couldn't figure out why, because I was cooking our Sunday dinner. And from there was a gentleman there, Vern Heiderman, who had Vern Glass Company. And he was talking to his wife. She said, you know, there's a family living here, 5 children. They've got no place to live, and it's really sad. He says, well, I'll see to that. And he came and saw me, and he never said hello, goodbye, anything. He just said, I'm going to buy you a house. He said, in the meantime, he said, we have some big tents you can use, and I think it would be nice to spend the summer at Darlington with your family. And that's what we did. We went to Darlington. We stayed down there until the first part of September and moved into the house that he bought. 2 houses. We had a pick of the two, and then we bought it from him on an agreement of purchase. And that's where we lived in the Cedardale area, which is south of here, south of the tracks. But we lived down there with our family for 9 years there. Then we bought a newer house.
Here in Oshawa, the first house I lived in was there at Taunton and Simcoe, Northminster. So I moved in there with a bunch of guys. It was fun. It was a bunch of friends I knew back in high school. Well, there was like 8 of us. And at one point there was like 10 of us somehow, because like they kept on being, they had people coming in and out. So that was like a challenge. I cooked for everyone, so I get like money off my rent. I don't know, like everyone there worked at the recycling plant, so they ate pretty much everything I cooked. Like it's a bunch of hungry guys. So.
My father is a survivor of the Soviet labor camps during World War II. He's a Pole, and there are many of them who live in the Oshawa community, actually. And my mother was English, and she trained as a nurse in England, and apparently there was no food or shoes in England, so she came to Canada for both, but landed here and found herself a husband. When he first came to Canada, he came on a labor contract in 1949, and that labor contract took him near London, and then eventually back to the Pickering area working as an agricultural laborer. And finally, he got wind of a established Polish community in Oshawa, and as many newcomers to Canada, he and his family decided, or sort of gravitated, if you will, to the Polish community, and they decided to settle here. And in fact, he was involved in many, many, many activities in establishing and building the Polish community from that time on. So for them, church, faith, community, history, culture, heritage were very important for their children. And so they established all of the things you could imagine for their children, such as scouting, dancing, cultural events. I attended Polish school. Our home was a very crowded, small bungalow off Harmony and the 401. And I was the eldest of the children my parents had, and at that time we only had 4 of us. My aunt also lived with us with her daughter. My grandmother also lived with us, and an uncle lived with us for a time. And there were people coming and going. It was a very typical post-war immigrant family.
It was a little place on Cadillac Avenue South, a post-war not raised bungalow, but a floor and a half. There were 9 of us living there, my mom, my dad, 6 kids, and my uncle. All of the kids slept upstairs in one big common room, separated by the stairs, and my parents lived on the other side of the stairs. It was a beautiful place, only 1 bathroom for 9 people, so wonderful things happened. It was a great neighborhood, lots of kids, so it was a great house too.
The first home and only home that I live in is with my husband. We bought it together before we were married, and it is a wonderful little place just up north. And it is part of a great neighborhood close to schools. It has a pool. It's everything that I wanted to have here in Oshawa. We had a very old barbecue when we moved in, and my husband wanted to create a nice celebratory barbecue. It was made for a long weekend, and he turned on the propane tank and forgot to connect it to the barbecue itself. So we had flames coming out of our propane tank that we quickly had to douse before we lost our home.